All right, welcome everyone to this class on Noahide Nations, Noahide class here, and spoke about family issues over the last number of weeks. And last week, or 2 weeks ago, we spoke about abortion. That was a hot topic. Definitely a hot topic. So now we're going to speak about circumcision, right? Bris Milah, as it is known, and certainly well known among Jewish tradition, right? Certainly for Jews. We know that Abraham himself and his household are commanded circumcision, direct commands. And the question is, does it apply to non-Jews? All right, $1.5 million or $2 million question, because we're always up the ante. Does it apply to non-Jews? And should non-Jews do it? Should they do it even on a voluntary basis? So the Talmud tells me, Sanhedrin 59b, the relevance of circumcision to who? To Abraham. His household is descendants. Now, let's keep in mind one thing before we go through this piece of Talmud, and that there are three signs that distinguish Jews from non-Jews. What are the three signs? One of them is Shabbos. God says it's a sign between me and you, right? God and the Jewish people. Prophet says tefillin, right, is a sign between God and the Jewish people. Non-Jews not allowed to wear tefillin. Even a JIT, a Jew in training, can only wear tefillin right before they convert, and there won't be any parchment in it, just to know how to put on tefillin. And there's a third thing that distinguishes Jews from non-Jews. What is that? Circumcision. Right? Three signs that distinguish Jews from non-Jews. It comes on the Gemara in Sanhedrin, and we see, as the Gemara says, we have Genesis chapter 17, verses 10 to 13, that the Torah says, this is my covenant, you shall keep between me, you and your offspring, after you, every male among you, going to be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskin, shall be a token of the covenant between me and you, right? He among you that is 8 days old shall be circumcised, every male throughout your generations that is born in your house. He is born in your house, may be circumcised. My covenant shall be for your flesh, everlasting covenant. What do we see? Mitzvah of circumcision given to who? Given to Abraham. Right now, who's the command to? Seems it's only to Abraham, his household, and his offspring. What would that mean? Wouldn't apply to non-Jews. Right, but we see that applies to Abraham, Isaac, and Ishmael. Ishmael also got circumcised. Right, there's going to be a question about the Muslims. Since they're the offspring of Ishmael, whether they have an obligation to circumcise themselves, we'll see. So Genesis chapter 21, verse 12 later says, whatever Sarah tells you, listen to her voice, because Isaac is going to call you your offspring. It's going to be considered yours. Right? In other words, Abraham's upset. She tells him to send away Ishmael, and Abraham gets upset. And God says, listen to what Sarah tells you. One thing we see, Sarah is greater in prophecy. Right? She understands through prophecy Ishmael is not going to be a good influence. Right now, who's called the offspring over here? Anyone that comes out of Abraham, i.e. through Isaac. Isaac's going to be called his offspring, not Ishmael. Right? One of the things the Quran takes issue with is the fact that we make Ishmael look bad. Okay. Right? Let them think what they want. But the Torah makes clear who's your offspring. It's going to go through Abraham, through Isaac. That's your offspring. Because the Torah says God gave everything to Abraham, gave everything to Isaac, and he gave gifts to the children of Hagar, children of Keturah. Keturah was Hagar. What type of gifts? Rashi says different names of God. Different names, whatever, let's say from the dark side. He sent it to the east, so we understand that, to the far east. That's why a lot of black magic and all that. Whole question why he gave it to them. Of all things. Spiritually he gave to Isaac. There was other offspring he gave witchcraft, seemingly. Alright, kind of hard to understand why we do that. But he gave everything spiritually to Isaac. So therefore, what would I understand? Who's obligated to be circumcised? Isaac. And Isaac says to Jacob, God will give to you and your descendants the blessing of Abraham. Right? Goes to Jacob, not to Esau, and Jacob takes it. Right? Not the discussion for now. He takes it. He takes what rightfully belongs to him. Right? So here we see God designated Jacob, not Esau, as the heir of this legacy from Abraham. And what's the legacy of Abraham? Circumcision. So, the offspring of Jacob, i.e. Israel, who are they today? Jewish people. Now, what about the descendants of Keturah, or Hagar? So the Torah states, Yosef Abraham, and he took a wife whose name is Keturah. Genesis chapter 25, verse 1. The Medrash, the commentaries, Rashi, the Ramban, others, note there are two anomalies here. First, the word by Yosef means he added. Literally means he added. It's a little bit strange. Right? Because it's saying he married her. Why does it say over here, he added? Right? Implies gathering in or adding over here. But we know what it means. It means over here that he got married. Right? That's what it means. So some of the commentaries say, what's it a reference to? Keturah. What does Keturah mean? Keturah means they were pleasing. Right? They were pleasing over here. The Medrash explains Abraham retakes Hagar, remarries her. She repented, the commentaries say. He took her back. She's faithful to him after Sarah's death. Now, we understand Genesis chapter 5, verse 2. They had 6 children. Avram and Hagar. So, the commentaries explain, okay, these kids, the male descendants, obligated circumcision. Why are they obligated circumcision? Logic. What's the logic over here? Anyone who was born into Abraham's home, anyone born into his home, is obligated circumcision. Oh, what's the obvious question? What happened to poor Ishmael? Wasn't he obligated? Ishmael wasn't obligated. Esau wasn't obligated. But they're never excluded. Doesn't say they can't, they're just not obligated. Over here. So there's a whole question over here. What's going on? Can they do it voluntarily? Now, if they're not obligated, doesn't necessarily mean it's forbidden. Right? Circumcision in general is a whole question. Right? Because everyone agrees there's one part of the body. The whole obligation of this part of the body is to take it off. I.e. the foreskin. Right? So people will say, there'll be a difference of opinion every couple of years. With the doctors, if you take off the foreskin, it's good against cancer. It's not good against cancer. But everyone agrees you don't need it. Right? The whole point of it is to take it off. They're still trying to figure out the appendix, right? Because everyone knows if your appendix bursts, you got to take it out. Right? It's certainly a danger. So they're slowly figuring out maybe what the appendix is. Hey, I needed that. Oh, sorry. Got to take it out. What can we do? Right? But everyone agrees the foreskin, the whole purpose is take it off. That's the whole purpose. Now, what about the descendants of these children? Who do they intermarry with? Right, with the descendants of Yishmael. Now, if they intermarry with the descendants of Yishmael, they're no different than the Ishmaelites. Pretty much the same. Can't tell the difference. Right? They're indistinguishable over here. So therefore, the modern Ishmaelites, who are they today? Have ancestry. They're obligated in circumcision. Right? But it's going to be different. It's not going to be the same. Right? Jews have to remove the entire foreskin. The children of Keturah, of Hagar, do the removal of the outer foreskin. They're not exactly the same. Nonetheless, over here we see the Rambam explains the Talmud's conclusions. The Laws of Kings, chapter 7, Laws 7 to 8. Halacha 7 says, Abraham and his descendants commanded in circumcision. Genesis chapter 17, verse 9 to 10 tells me clear, keep my covenant, you and your offspring. You shall circumcise every male. The descendants of Ishmael are excluded. Genesis chapter 21, verse 12. Right? Through Isaac, your offspring will be called. So, not Ishmael. So he's excluded. And Esau's descendants also excluded. Says the Rambam, because Isaac told Jacob, Genesis chapter 28, verse 4, may God grant Abraham's blessing to you and your descendants. You, your descendants from Abraham, not Esau, because he's the true offspring of Abraham, right, who maintain the faith of his religious behavior. Therefore, they're only obligated in circumcision. Now, the question is, $2 million question, because we have the ante. The question is, Abraham, as a wild son. Ishmael, he's called a wild son. His hand is the hand of everyone, everyone's the hand of his. He's wild. Ownerless, his ownerless, body's ownerless. They think the world is ownerless, right? Not a popular thing to say over here. But what's the character traits of Yishmael? They steal. Their hands in the hand of everyone. They steal. That's part of their DNA. And if people's houses are broken into here in Israel, most likely, not a racist statement because it's proven statistically, car stolen, who stole it? Usually it's Arabs. Not going to say Jews don't. It's usually Arabs. Because someone's going to say, oh, that's terrible. But it's a fact. People can say what they want. It's a fact. Anyone who lives in Israel knows that. It's a fact. Now, that being the case, how does that happen? I'm not going to say every last, Arab, whatever, does that, but that's part of their DNA. That's what the Torah says, right? Very unpopular to say, but that's their DNA. Totally their DNA. Right? So that is by Ishmael. And you see that Yitzhak also had 2 sons. Right? He's got a righteous son. He's got Esau. But Esau was righteous up until a point, and then he went off. So it's not interesting, not the topic for now either. And that is, how did the main pillar of Judaism, it says in Derech Hashem, he's the tree. He's the main part of the tree. Everyone else are the branches. Abraham. He's the main thing over here. He's the roots. Everyone else are branches. Right? So you take a giant among giants. that God chose. And he chose God in order to be the father of all nations. He had a wild son. Yitzhak, who inherited all the spirituality from his father, almost got sacrificed. Also has a wayward son. Right? Food for thought. Not, how can it be? The pillars of the Jewish people have two wayward sons. Right? Simple explanation is, it's because the father's righteous doesn't mean the son's coming out the same way. One possible explanation. You have to look at who they are. Up until the age of Bar Mitzvah, you couldn't tell the difference between Esav and Yaakov. Some say, I'll just throw this out there, that, after the Bar Mitzvah of Esav, where you make a blessing and you say, okay, I'm exempt from the punishment for this son, meaning he's now a man, he's going to be obligated to mitzvahs. So Yitzhak didn't have too much to do with his education after that. So some say it was a claim against Yitzhak, against Isaac, which goes to show that a father has an obligation to be watch over very carefully their kids' education even after Bar Mitzvah. Right? It's all brought down one place. But anyway, not the topic for now. But an interesting thing. The pillars of who the Jewish people are, look what they had. Right? You say, by Moses also had a son that went off. Idol worship and all that. All that, but the best of people. So, Halacha 8, our sages related descendants of Keturah, who the offspring of Abraham and Hagar that came after Isaac and Ishmael. They're obligated in circumcision. Oh, look. Says the Rambam, they're obligated. Not the same obligation as Jews, but they're obligated. So the descendants of Ishmael become intermingled. We don't know who they are. With the descendants of Keturah. Therefore, they're all obligated. Circumcision on the 8th day. So, Arabs, they come from that ancestry. They're obligated. So again, it's not the same type of circumcision. Right? By a Jew, the entire foreskin is taken off. By a non-Jew, not that way. By a Muslim, not that way. Right? Definitely not that way. But you see, they're obligated, the Rambam says. Totally obligated. Now the question is, what about non-Jews? What about Noahides? The Talmud tells me, Nevodah Zorah 65a, the name of Rabbi Bar Barachana, said the name of Rabbi Yochanan, a Ger Toshav, someone who lives in the land, keeps the Noahide laws, who allows 12 months to pass without circumcising himself, is like any other idolater. He loses status. Of a Ger Toshav. And the sages responded, that's only the case where he made a vow, and he failed to do so. If he made a vow and he says, I'm going to circumcise myself, and he doesn't, that's how that applies. That means he goes back to being an idolater. He made a vow. If he didn't make a vow, there would be nothing wrong. So the cases of a non-Jew, when they accept the Noahide laws, let's remember, I don't want to get in trouble here, a non-Jew wants to accept the Noahide laws. There's no obligation to go in front of a rabbinical court. If they want to, 100% they can. They want to get a certificate. It gives them strength, etc. They can do it. We said before they should go in front of a witness or two, and declare they're taking on the Noahide laws. But are they under obligation to go to a rabbinical court? No. It's only by a Ger Toshav. We don't have Ger Toshav today anyway. Right? Because we don't have a Jubilee year. But that we spoke about. So here, it's only when he accepts the Noahide laws to be a Ger Toshav, and he voluntarily vows to be circumcised. If he hasn't done so after 12 months, what's our assumption? He made a false vow. His vow was insincere. So if he's insincere on this vow, how can we accept that he's going to keep the Noahide laws? That's why he's got the status of an idolater. Right? Bottom line, he lost his believability. He made a vow, he didn't keep it. So if he didn't keep it, what are we going to say? He loses status, he goes back to being an idolater. So first thing we learn out, a ger tosha may circumcise himself. Good luck with that. But okay. Not only that, we also see circumcision is voluntary. Is a ger toshav obligated to circumcise himself? No. He can, okay, but he's not obligated. Comes on the Rambam, says the Rambam in the Laws of Kings, chapter 8, halacha 10, and he says anyone who agrees to circumcise himself and allows 12 months to pass is considered an idolater. Oh, what about what we said before? Right? What does Maimonides say? What does the Rambam here say? The Rambam said, what does the Gemara say? It says anyone. Now, what do you mean anyone over here? Right? You've got to think. What does it mean? Does it mean the Talmud statement is not unique to ger toshav? Maybe it's for everybody. Applies to any non-Jew except the Noahide laws. Right? Get out your machete. Let's go. Right? Anyone wants to join? We're all set. We're all ready. If it's applied to anyone, even modern Noahides, so who's considered him an idolater? Right? Again, he made a vow. If he didn't make a vow, why do I say he's an idolater over here? Also, he makes the vow to circumcise himself. When did he make it? When did he make the vow? Over here. Right? So you might say, well, it's connected to the acceptance of the Noahide laws. Maybe. Or is it talking about any religiously motivated circumcision? Maybe it's talking about that. Or you could say, come on, you're reading something into it's not there. Maybe anyone means any ger toshav. What do I say? Anybody in the world? Any non-Jew? Right? But it could be circumcision permitted to any non. Could be. So there are a certain number of conclusions we can come to. Come on, Rabbeinu Yerucham. In his book, told us Adam V'Chava, Beis Yosef, Rav Yosef Karo brings the end of your day, 266. And what did he say? He says, prohibited to circumcise a non-Jew for any reason other than conversion. Right? Conversion Judaism. Why are you going to get circumcised? Forget about the machete. Why is he going to get circumcised? Because he's doing it for the sake of conversion. Okay? That's why I tell people don't get circumcised before. If you already get circumcised, okay. Right? Person already got circumcised and want to convert. Can they get circumcised again? Right? Foreskin is gone. So you do what they call hatafas dam. You draw blood. Right? They go needle, make a little prick. You draw blood. That's it. Right? So it comes on the Ramosha Isserus, blessed memory. And he says that's Allah. So of Ashkenazim. In the Code of Jewish Law over there. 263, halacha 5 in Yeridea. When I look at these two laws, what do I see? Right? We see that a Jew may circumcise a non-Jew as well for medical purposes. For medical purposes. Many of the commentaries say. So now, when I look at these things together, so what do I see? That a Jew is precluded from circumcising a Noahide for religious purposes. If it's for the sake of conversion, different issue. But if Noahides can practice circumcision, as Talmud says, certainly implies, then why can't Jews help them? A non-Jew wants to be circumcised. So what are we going to say? Go to a non-Jew to do it. Why do we have to help you? Maybe it's prohibited for a Jew to help. Maybe it's only permitted for a Jew to help a Jew. Or, for maybe the sake of conversion. Let's see. So come along the post game, the religious decisors come over here and say that after the Ramah, we're not sure. We're not sure what's going on over here. How do we apply it? How is it supposed to be applied? Because there are other contradictions. Right? Well, the commentaries in the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law over there, right, debate the reasons. One reason could be assisting a non-Jew nullifying circumcision sign of the covenant. Oh, very good. There's a sign of the covenant only for Jews. Who says you're allowed to help a non-Jew? You're not part of the covenant. No, it's part of the covenant here. The Jews are given the covenant. There are things that apply to non-Jews. I get it. Right? But they're not part of the covenant. But it's not, so that would be forbidden. That, according to that, should be forbidden. At the same time, it's not clear, that the Zohar, get into a little bit of Kabbalah here, that the Zohar writes that Yosef sinned by encouraging the Egyptians to adopt circumcision. Right? It's a knock against Yosef Atzadik. Right? What did he say? All the Egyptians should be circumcised. Even though Yosef himself did it for the sake of heaven. It could be there were 4 circumcisions would be prohibited in any case. Right? It's a different issue. Right? So it could be one of the commentaries who hold that assisting the non-Jews nullifying circumcision sign of the covenant doesn't necessarily mean he would oppose Noahide circumcision. In other words, if Noahide does it, who says it's forbidden? Now, logic might tell me maybe it is. Because it was prohibited before giving the Torah, not necessarily afterwards. Right? There's a whole discussion over here. So, what's the conclusion? What would we say over here? So, it doesn't seem to say that Noahides are prohibited from circumcising themselves. Get a non-Jew to do it? Not a problem. Right? Doesn't seem like it's a problem. Right? And not only that, it's a sign of commitment. Even after, or even before Abraham was commanded in it. Why? Because the Medrash tells me, Medrash Parshas Miketz, or Medrash Tanchuma, sorry, in Noah chapter 6, verse 5. What does it tell me over there? States that Adam, Shes, and Noah all came into the world circumcised. That's pretty significant. We say they're righteous people that are born circumcised. Not only that, but if there's a prohibition on Noahides practicing circumcision, then the prohibition would be upon them and not upon Jews. Right? It would only be on them, not on us. So what does the Gemara seem to say? Since the Gemara permits any Noahide to voluntarily circumcise themselves. If they want to, they're allowed to. The Rambam goes according to what the Gemara says, that if it's for the issue of trusting the Ger Toshav's acceptance of the Noahide laws, that would be good. Right? That gives them strength, commitment. But there's no reason to assume there should be any difference. What's the difference between a Noahide and Ger Toshav? In that sense. So it's permitted for a Ger Toshav, why wouldn't it be permitted for a Noahide? But you could say, maybe there's a prohibition against wounding yourself. You're not allowed to make a wound. Right? So maybe you say, well, I can't go to the dentist either. The dentist's going to make a wound even if he's a non-Jew. Maybe it's forbidden because it's going to maybe cause your gums to bleed or whatever. Right? So making a wound, very hard to say in this case, falls under this prohibition. Right? I did a video on Tanakh Talk about circumcision isn't mutilation. Right? Certainly secular people say, it's barbaric. Right? So someone asks you, isn't circumcision barbaric? You know what you say? Barbarians don't do it. I've never been able to use the line. It's a great line, though. Anyone who wants to use it, you don't have to quote me. It's a good line. Regardless over here, who says circumcision is making a wound? It's a divine command. Why would it come under that prohibition? You're doing something God said so. So whoever made a wound, it makes a wound there. It does, it's true. But who says it falls under that prohibition? So even though Noahides can voluntarily circumcise themselves, it may be forbidden for a Jewish doctor to do it, or a moil. Right? Because we have an obligation to do it for ourselves. Who says there's right? There's a doubt over here. There's a major doubt over here. Whether non-Jews, Noahides, want, if they want circumcision, that Jews should do it. Who says Jews should do it? Could be prohibited. Right? We saw before it could be prohibited. So therefore, if a non-Jew wants to do it, we see that doesn't really seem like a problem for non-Jews to do it. What's the only caveat? There's always a but. What is the caveat over here? To make sure it's done by a non-Jew, not by a Jew. Because it could create problems for Jews. Might be forbidden for Jews. Right? So therefore, if it might be forbidden, we're not going to do it. Can a non-Jew do it? What's the problem? They'd be allowed to do it. Use, raise machete over here. Not a problem. Right? Ray, make money from it. Might be a good thing for Noahide nations. Okay. Right? I want to digress here. Point is, for Jews to do it on non-Jews, be a problem. For non-Jews to do it on themselves, shouldn't be a problem. It shouldn't be a problem. So, so any questions on that? Source of circumcision, who's exempt from circumcision, descendants of Keturah, Hagar, and the applications. Any questions on any of that? All right, anyone have any general questions? Deal with any general questions? Gonna get Ray a sharpening. So sharpen the machete. I once told someone, it's like, Rabbi, I'm ready to convert this and that. I'll do whatever it takes. I said, you ready for circumcision? I got a machete. He goes, that doesn't scare me. I said, why not? You ever see me use a machete? Anyway, don't want to digress. Yeah, anyone have any general questions? Good. So I get off easy today. No one has any general questions. I'm going to sign out. So we're going to make this announcement. The next 2 weeks, next Sunday, the 9th, and the 9th and the 16th. So I'm going to be, the 9th will be, it'll be right before Sukkot. And the 16th will be right before the last days of the holiday of Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah. So I'm not going to be around. So you guys get 2 weeks off. I guess we'll be back on the 23rd. So Ray, you'll take a note of that. I'm gonna make an announcement also. Put it on my pages, whatever. But yeah, so next 2 weeks there won't be any. There won't be any classes. They'll still be in and out around. So anyone has any questions, they can certainly send them. Certainly send them my way. I've been called a lot of things. Never been called sir. It's okay. Yeah, so if no one has any questions, then I'm going to sign out. I'm going to wish anyone who's celebrating, certainly happy, a meaningful Yom Kippur. And I will say, if I have offended anyone, you probably deserved it. But if I did offend anyone, all kidding aside, then I ask for any forgiveness. And no one has to worry about offending me. I got broad shoulders, so everyone is everyone's good. So everyone should have a meaningful Yom Kippur. Certainly, everyone last chance. If there's, God forbid, been a bad decree, last chance to uproot this, bad, this bad decree, through Torah, tefillah, tzedakah, through prayer, through charity, other things. So, we shall be sealed in the book of life, and we shall have, health, livelihood, all the good things. If we have kids, kids should go in the right direction, and, everyone should be healthy and have good things. So I'm going to sign out. We're having a good middle of the day, almost end of the day for me, and everyone have a great rest of the week, and everyone enjoy the break. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.